Alright, so last week I mentioned that I was hoping to see Dragged Across Concrete this week and talk about it with Dumbo for a very odd double feature, but seeing as how I was pretty much sick all this week and I'm just now kind of getting over it, I couldn't exactly bring myself to see what as Craig Zoller was up to at that particular time, so I figure I'll just do this by itself, and then we'll talk about Dragged Across Concrete next week when we talk about Shazam and Pet Sematary. So, seems much more fitting to at least one of those. So, we'll go ahead and talk about Dumbo now, which, as far as the existence of this movie goes, I know a lot of people are freaking out because Disney's kind of going all in on their live-action remakes this year. With this, followed by, is it Aladdin and then The Lion King, or the other way around? I can't remember, but yeah. So they're really going after their big ones too, especially, and obviously people have been using this as a way to say, Disney's just returning their same shit because they're out of ideas and they're this big, conglomerate company and all that stuff. Especially after the whole Fox thing, it's like everything just looks like greed and money and all that. But the thing about these Disney live-action remakes is I think it really just depends. I mean, I'm sure anybody can just look back and say, oh, it's all for money and it doesn't matter. But I've obviously shown that I have liked some of them. Like, I really like what Jon Favreau did with The Jungle Book, which is why I'm not totally freaking out negatively about his Lion King. And Bill Condon's Beauty and the Beast I actually didn't mind. It's the stuff like Maleficent that I think is like a really bad idea, and which makes me realize, even though the idea of a remake should probably be to take the same story and do something new with it, it seems like they fail when they do try to do something different than they initially done with it, and the closer they stay to the original material, it seems like the better it ends up being. And the interesting thing about Tim Burton's version of Dumbo here is it's kind of both those things, where it's like because obviously the animated movie is only an hour long, so you go into it thinking like, okay, how are they going to take a movie that's an hour long and stretch it to almost double that? What can they add to it? How are they going to bloat this story so that it somehow starts and ends the same way? Because that's usually how this goes, but that's not how Dumbo goes. Dumbo is the original movie, pretty much from beginning to end, with a couple of scenes here and there that they save for the second half. And the second half basically being like an almost hour-long epilogue to what the original story was, which is an interesting approach to take, but at the same time, it's like, it's basically like you're watching Dumbo again, and then you're watching the sellout straight-to-DVD sequel just built into it, as opposed to a separate entity. And the whole Michael Keaton story is that. Like, he's not in the story at all until the entire original movie has gone all the way from beginning to end. So that right away, I almost kind of, like, I actually think maybe if it had been executed better and the story would have been better, that would be a really good and interesting approach to adding to the story. It's like literally add to the story, tell the story, and then something else. But that's the problem though, is it's like, it's the exact kind of plot you would expect it to be, and they really don't add anything else to that. But that's basically the main layout. When you start from the beginning, it was, because this is before I realized that was the setup, so it's like, I wonder how much they're going, because obviously, we're not going to do the talking animals approach now, which to a certain extent makes sense, as far as like live-action remakes of Disney movies, where this is one of the few where, even though there are talking animals in the original, the main character isn't one of them. So it's like, I could see where they could do that. Despite the fact that you've got stuff like entire plot points, like how the ringmaster gets the idea to make Dumbo the main show because the mouse whispers in his ear while he's sleeping. And it's like, how are they going to pull that off? Because the only mouse we get in this is like at the very beginning and then the very end. DeVito's just soaking in a bathtub and then hears the word baby and has an epiphany. Obviously, probably not as, showy as a talking mouse whispers into his ear while he sleeps, but I guess if we're going to take that approach, and obviously they have to throw in more human characters, where we have Colin Farrell and his children, where he's just come back from the war missing an arm, and his wife is dead. So, it's Disney, one of them had to die. So, this opening, though, as Colin Farrell returns, before, actually, is it before or after? I've already forgotten the order of the events of this movie. But the whole opening is like the exact same opening of the animated movie, where we see like the Florida map and we see the train traveling around and all that, and we see the different attractions to the circus and all that. And interestingly enough, it did also look rather animated, and my first fear was, is that really shitty CGI, or are they intentionally, is it kind of intentionally looking animated to sort of bring us, to basically give us the same opening to say, okay, we're going to transition and show you the animation because this is what you're familiar with, and then we're going to transition into the live action, because it does start to look a bit clearer and less CGI heavy once that sequence ends and the train just pulls in itself, and then we go into the live action characters and all that. So I would say that is probably intentional. There is going to be a lot of really obvious CGI there, particularly from the animals. Like even like the snake around the dude's body is like everything animal wise looks animated. But interestingly enough, they seem to get better with that as it goes on. I don't know if I just got used to it, or if, like I said, maybe it was an intentional gradual thing. I don't know. But there are some things, like, obviously, Dumbo's not going to look realistic because the whole point is that he looks abnormal. But once you kind of get used to that, it is really easy to really love what they've done with him animation-wise, especially with his face and how emotive his eyes are, and how sympathetic this little CGI creature is throughout the entire thing. Even if it's maybe going borderline too cutesy at some point, you kind of just don't care because it works enough. But the way they're able to, like, make his face expressive, like when they put the clown makeup on him and all that, and he's got to do that whole routine, you can see, like, the shame and embarrassment on his face, even when it's got the clown makeup on it, which is really impressive. And then obviously you've got, like, his mother, which sometimes looks really, really real, and then other times maybe not so much. And then that's basically where it's like, the entire first hour of the movie, before the whole Michael Keaton thing even happens, the movie basically feels like Water for Elephants, just with the character of Dumbo inserted into it. Which, coming from me, really isn't too much of a complaint, but as far as, like, the feel of it, because when you see Tim Burton's name on it, you kind of start to expect a certain feel. And I know, obviously, Burton has not been, hitting home runs lately. So, pretty much every time his name comes up now, it's usually met with, oh god, what's he done to this material we used to love? And is he going to do his same old thing with it? But the thing here is that a lot of it doesn't feel like him. Actually, it rarely feels like him. There's one moment when they're doing the whole clown routine, and the music and the clowns coming out and all that kind of brings back the memory of the Clown Nightmare and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But apart from that, and obviously the cast, obviously we've got, him and DeVito completing their circus trilogy, as they call it, with Batman Returns, Big Fish, and now this, which is really cool, and something I hadn't thought about till I heard them say that. And the sort of, I like the meshing of the casts here, where we have, like, Keaton and DeVito here, kind of rounding out the old school Burton cast, and you've got the more new era Burton cast with Eva Green, who he put in Dark Shadows and Miss Peregrine. So I did like as far as that goes, but even so, the first thing I noticed, and this may seem like something that probably shouldn't matter, but I guess that's just like the traditionalist in me or what, but the fact that all of Tim Burton's movies up to this point have, like, a recognizable opening title sequence. Like those opening title sequences where it's usually, like, either panning over something or it's showing us something as we're get this whole opening title sequence. And this one doesn't have one at all. Like, they could have even thrown it in with the whole, montage, the train going around Florida and all that, but no. So that right away kind of felt like, this really doesn't feel like Burton at all, and it kind of keeps up with that throughout the whole thing, so... I mean, if your fear is that it's going to be all Burton-y, that's not the case. But like I said, I don't know if that's better or worse, because even so, there's still a certain, like, no matter what Burton's reputation is now, there's still kind of a certain, like, expectation that comes with his name, because even though we've got stuff like, Alice in Wonderland and Dark Shadows didn't really work for me, but I actually, and the more times I see it, I actually like Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children the more I see it. And I was one of the few people that took to Big Eyes well enough. So it's like he's still in there, so there's still gonna be like this. And I've noticed this even also with the people that are dismissive of him, and it's like, you still kind of have that hope inside, no matter how much, Alice in Wonderland killed your spirit or whatever. But I don't know, like I said, I guess that goes out the window because it really doesn't even feel like him much at all. So it's really just comes down to when they don't change the movie, when they are just doing the original movie in the first hour, it comes down to how they're going to execute the scenes that we already know. Because, I mean, there is the new stuff, like the whole Colin Farrell storyline and his children, and his daughter's got a whole subplot about how she's trying to be some science genius or something. And it's not, like, bad, but it is just kind of there. And there is something touching about the way, they sort of grow on Dumbo throughout, and he kind of does start to become attached to them, despite his attachment to his mother, who eventually ends up getting shipped off once the events of the original movie are over and they needed another conflict. But, and so, it's fine, it's there. So you're just kind of waiting for how they execute those other scenes. And like I said, this is where I feel like the live-action remakes are either kind of make or break themselves. Kind of like, I think that when, the Beauty and the Beast one kind of won me over was how well I thought they executed Be Our Guest. I don't know how most people feel about that, but I don't really care. I remember thinking it was pretty well executed. It was like, okay, so as long as they're not, like, doing some Maleficent thing where they, like, totally and completely go against what those characters even were, as long as they execute this well, fine. And they make it feel like it was worth doing this, fine. So you've got, like, the baby mine scene, obviously, is gonna stick out. And they do restrain Dumbo's tears for a couple more scenes, probably to have mercy on us. But as far as the whole, animals don't talk thing, so, like, if the animals aren't singing, what is it? And it's one of the characters that they've already established before sings, so I didn't feel like it was, like, too shoehorned in to have a character on the side singing it while the scene happened. So it was fine. I do know, obviously they saved this for later in the second half, but I'd actually heard a lot of complaining about how they handled the pink elephants thing, and how a lot of people had high expectations because the scene's so trippy, and it's Burton, and he can do whatever. Well, also keep in mind, I'm not quite sure what people were expecting, because Tim Burton's also the guy that didn't take advantage of having the boat in his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So I don't know what they thought he was going to do with pink elephants, but what I had basically heard was that it was there for like a fraction of a second, and then DeVito says, like, pink elephants. No, it's a whole sequence. It's not, trippy, it's not the black background and the really fucked up animation. It's the bubble thing, but I mean, it was fun. Obviously, it's not going to be, this drug-induced looking thing that's going on, but I thought they handled it fine. But then again, the original Dumbo is not really a movie that I'm, like, insanely passionate about, so maybe that's why I don't really see the big deal in how they handled it. I thought they did it fine. But, yeah, I mean, I guess if you were expecting something as, insane feeling as what the original movie did, I guess, but But that's the thing, though, is if you tried to do something like that in this movie, in the context that it's in, as late in the movie as it happens, how do you do that without just completely making it... Because one of the criticisms I had, if you want to go back to the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, was everybody loves how trippy and insane and freaky the boat scene is. But I just come away from that scene thinking, oh, but in the context of everything around it, why? So I think like that would I would have had the same reaction if they tried to do something really really outlandish with the pink elephants thing. It would, by the time it happens in the movie, it would have seemed really out of place. And the fact that they just kind of work it into the show makes sense to me, and in the context that they eventually got it in. It's just a matter of if you're already mad by the time that we get that late into the movie, then yeah, you're probably not going to like how that turns out either, which would make sense also. But I was fine with it. So, and as far as the other storylines go, we do have the whole Keaton thing, which, like I said, is a bit played out, and I do think... I had heard some critics say, like, he was almost going back to his Beetlejuice roots with how much over the top he went with this. I think that's kind of the problem with the movie, is I don't think this character's over the top enough. Because we've seen the crazy shit that Keaton's capable of with roles like Beetlejuice, and we've just got such a basic-ass storyline of, I'm going to be the big corporate guy that comes in. I'm sure a lot of people will find that interesting coming from Disney, who comes in and tries to make everybody sell out. I do like that the ultimate sellout point is replacing DeVito with Michael Buffer to kind of make it this ultimate sort of, it's all about the production value and how big they can possibly go thing. But yeah, it's so basic. I almost feel like Keaton would have had to have just completely and totally like massacred the scenery around him for this to be more interesting than it is. There's like one moment that I thought was really funny. I'm not even sure if it's intentional or not. When he has that moment when he's trying to strike the deal with DeVito and he's talking and he's building it up, and he like turns to the camera with DeVito facing the other way and like as if he's presenting the idea to the camera itself and breaking the fourth wall, and then it cuts to the other side to get DeVito's face, and Keaton is still facing that way, presenting to an invisible camera. I don't know if that's what they meant that shot to be, but that's how I took it, so I appreciate it. But apart from that, yeah, he is over the top. Yeah, he's got like the weird distracting haircut and the voice. But like I said, if you're going to make this whole storyline interesting, especially if it's going to be the entire second half after you've already done the entire original movie, you had to do more than this. So that's... And it's like, once it goes from there, it's like you know every direction it's going to go in. And you're going to have the whole, you know, missing moms thing from Bruce. Like, I guess that's what I like about the connection between Dumbo and the kids, is there's the whole missing mother aspect where they come together, where it's like, just as Dumbo's mom is being shipped away, in dialogue at the same moment, we have one of those times where the kids say, if Mom was here, this wouldn't happen, and Farrell has to say, well, Mom's not here, and it's like, oh, you can say that about both of them now. And it's like, you just kind of see where everything is going until it gets to the climax, and then this was where it was like, I mean, this second storyline was kind of starting to lose me, but then, like, once we get to the climax, I mean, you do care about Dumbo, and you care about the kids to a certain extent. So when they're surrounded by fire and all that, like they're in Dwayne Johnson's skyscraper or whatever, there is something there, I guess. But once again, you know, we know how it's going to turn out. We know why this climax is happening and how big it's going to try to go. But the thing is that the end of this movie feels like an eternity. And not only does it feel like the climax takes forever, but we get like 2 more endings after it. One of those things where it's like, oh, hey, this is the ending, but it's like, oh no, this scene's actually the ending, and then this scene goes maybe just a little longer than it needs to, and then when it finally does decide to fade out, you're like, oh wait, that's it? Oh, okay. There were like so many better shots you could have faded out on there, but fine. So, yeah, obviously it loses its way along the way, but I mean, for the most part, I'm okay with it, I guess. I'm not really sure what the consensus is. I think the last time I looked, the critics were like pretty much exactly split. Not that that necessarily matters, but so yeah, I mean, that's that's what it is. It's the original movie with some new stuff thrown in, and then like a straight DVD sequel built into it, with some of the scenes you're looking for kind of spread out in both. So yeah, and like I said, as far as the appearance goes, I was kind of afraid it was going to be a bit too CGI heavy, but it did start to, like, the whole setting and the CGI and all the animals and all that did kind of like I said, I don't know if I got used to it or if it just got better as the movie went. I can't really tell, but um, yeah, so it's fine. And obviously, the cast, Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito. I've always found Eva Green a little overrated, but it's not like she has a shitload to do here anyway. So the Alan Arkin comes in too, kind of late, who has also previously worked with Burton on Edward Scissorhands. So there's that whole thing too. But yeah, I think that's the thing that threw me off too, was as soon as I saw the first still of Keaton's character, I kind of assumed who his character was, and you can just tell, and you've kind of figured that's. I assume the advertisement is saying that's what the plot is, but it's just the whole thing of like the fact that we get the entire movie before that even comes into play. I think says a lot about how much they were going to stretch this idea out. And like I said, if maybe they had come up with a better story for the second half, maybe doing the entire first hour of Dumbo and then going into another thing would have been a good idea, but this is what it is. So I kind of like it, but I can totally see where people are like, what's the point? Why? This doesn't need to be here. So that's what that was. So as I said, next week, Shazam, Pet Cemetery, Drowned Girls Concrete, and then like a whole bunch of. When I say a whole bunch of verses, I think I might possibly mean it this time. I got like way. I've been like way sidetracked since the end of December, so we're trying to get back there, but. Hopefully that happens, and we'll go from there. So until all of that stuff, I think that's it.